Morning to everyone who is following us from Latin America and the Caribbean. Good afternoon to all the Europeans that are following this event. I would like to extend our warmest words of welcome to the fifth and last session on sustainable tourism, which the EULAC Foundation jointly organizes with the UNDP. And this session will focus on employment resilience and on social protection for the workers and those employed in the tourism sector. I give a warm welcome to everyone who is following us either through the Zoom platform or also through UVTV and through Facebook Live from different parts of our regions. And please let me just tell you that in the Zoom platform, there is the possibility to access translation from English to Spanish or from Spanish to English. It is simultaneous. Just clicking on the bottom of interpretation. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor first to Ms. Almudena Fernandez on behalf of UNDP. Almudena, the words are yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. Let me start by saying a very warm thank you to the EU Foundation for partnering with us in this series of events that we've been having on sustainable tourism and related issues. It's really a pleasure for us, for UNDP, to partner with you, and we're very happy to be here. Thank you to you, Anna. Thank you, Mr. Adrian Bonilla, for your support, and a warm greeting to all the panelists that are with us here today. I'm delighted to participate in this important event on employment resilience and social protection for sustainable tourism. Latin America and the Caribbean countries have a very rich biodiversity and very rich cultures, and many of our economies benefit greatly from tourism being a very important sector in the region. And we also are very aware that sustainable and inclusive tourism can play a critical role in helping countries achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And across the whole agenda, it can really be a sector that can help us think about the agenda as a whole and make progress towards it. Tourism accounts for half of the service exports in Latin America and the Caribbean, and represents a very significant share of gross employment product, of gross domestic product and employment. In the context of COVID-19, however, the pandemic has really put in a stark reality how vulnerable the sector can be in terms of external shocks. In 2020 alone, the World Travel and Tourism Council estimates that the pandemic cost Latin America's tourism industry more than $230 billion in losses. This, of course, was accompanied by a very stark drop in employment in the sector. And this is exactly what we're here to discuss. How do we think about sustainable tourism in the context of the people that are employed in the sector? And how do we think about resilient employment and social protection in this context? Many of those that lost their jobs because of the contraction of the standstill, really, of the tourism industry in the past year, were in the informal sector, and were left without the safety nets necessary to withhold through the pandemic. So how do we think about creating employment that diminishes the vulnerability of the people that work here? Well, there's no denying that the impacts of the pandemic have been devastating. We believe we're being given a chance to do things differently with unbridled creativity and innovation. The pandemic provides a turning point to change the paradigm to more sustainable and diversified forms of tourism, building on maximizing the blue, the green, and the orange economies, which are already issues that are being discussed in the region and are already sectors that are really being exploited in the region. Accelerated recovery in the tourism sector will also hinge on how fast countries can access and vaccinate their population. So I think vaccination is a key issue that we also need to think about. for the industry to restart, but also for the safety of the people employed in it. The challenge ahead is to rethink the tourism sector in the region towards one that is more resilient to external shock and in which employees are less vulnerable. This is precisely what the conversation we will be having today is about. How can we build a resilient employment and social protection in a sustainable tourism sector? Another thing that the pandemic has really made evident is the importance of social protection systems that go beyond just supporting people that are in the formal sector. The reality in our region is that the vast majority of the labor force is employed in informal sectors or transitions from formal and informal employment often throughout their work life. So we need to really think about social protection that goes beyond the fragmented programs that we have seen in the region and that have expanded in the region in the past decades. Our recent regional human development report launched by UNDP just this year goes in depth about how we can rethink social protection, not only for the tourism sector, but beyond. And it emphasizes 4 characteristics that I think are key. First, we need to think about social protection that is universal. And by that, we mean that every person exposed to specific risk needs to be covered for that risk. We also need to think about social protection that is inclusive. How do we make our social protection systems adequate for different groups of population with the risk they face on their daily lives? We also need to think about social protection that is fiscally sustainable. So there's no discussion about rethinking social protection without thinking about the fiscal aspect of that. How can we finance social protection that is sustainable over time? And finally, we need to think about how can we make social protection friendly to growth. Social protection should be an enabler for sectors to grow as well. And it shouldn't come at a cost of the growth of sectors. So I think those are kind of the main principles of how we're thinking that the region needs to move towards a more comprehensive, inclusive, and sustainable social protection system. And I think this is particularly relevant to the tourism sector. So without further ado, I'll give it back to you, Ana. Again, as UNDP, we're very happy to be part of these events, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Almudena Fernandez, for this important initial remarks with which you already gave us some food for thought for the further dialogue of today. And I would now like to pass on the floor to Dr. Adrián Bonilla, the Executive Director of the EULAC Foundation.
Thank you, Ana. Let me speak in Spanish. Queridas amigas, estimada doctora Panagiota Dionosopoulou, perdón, había un eco. Veronica Gomez, directora de la Organización Internacional de Turismo Social, Kerstin Howell, Secretaría Política del Sector Turismo de la Federación Europea de Sindicatos de Alimentación y Agricultura, estimado Diego Rey, especialista en políticas del empleo de la OIT, querida Almudena, asesora del director para América Latina y el Caribe del PNUD, queridas amigas, queridos amigos que nos acompañan en esta mañana y en esta tarde en América Latina, el Caribe y Europa. Para nosotros, para quienes trabajamos en la Fundación EULAC, es inmensamente satisfactorio el poder compartir este espacio para continuar una jornada de reflexiones acerca de los caminos posibles de transformación, de resiliencia, de actualización del sector turístico en las 2 regiones, con un enfoque que intersecta la sostenibilidad tanto en la Unión Europea cuanto en América Latina y el Caribe. Y esta idea de sostenibilidad no se plantea exclusivamente como una política ambiental, sino como una política social, pues está informada por objetivos que en las 2 regiones se comparten especialmente sin disenso alguno, que son los objetivos de desarrollo sustentable de Naciones Unidas. A lo largo de las últimas semanas hemos tenido este ciclo de eventos que ha sido francamente muy productivo y que ha tenido una asistencia diversa, pero al mismo tiempo muy importante, tanto en número cuanto en la calidad de las personas que nos han visitado en jornadas coorganizadas con el Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo. En estas jornadas hemos intentado resaltar las diversas voces interesadas en la construcción de este turismo sostenible y resiliente a ambos lados del Atlántico. Y los escenarios que se han producido han convocado a representantes gubernamentales, a personas vinculadas a organismos internacionales y regionales, a actores de la actividad en el sector privado y en la sociedad civil de ambas regiones, y se han logrado identificar retos, problemas, pero también posibilidades de políticas, de buenas prácticas, de ideas innovadoras y de posibilidades de líneas estratégicas comunes para avanzar en esta recuperación que, repito, está alineada en la Agenda 2030 de Naciones Unidas, en los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, pero también en la agenda birregional, ¿no? Producida por las altas autoridades de relaciones exteriores de las dos regiones, por ejemplo, en reuniones como las que hubo el día de ayer entre los presidentes de los organismos, los jefes de Estado, presidentes pro tempore de los organismos regionales de América Latina y el Caribe, más las presidencias de la Unión Europea en su comisión, en su consejo, al igual que las autoridades de la política exterior de la Unión Europea. Una importante reunión la de ayer y la de hace un año en Berlín, en donde esta idea de resiliencia, de recuperación, ¿sí?, sostenible, es parte de una agenda que en el caso de América Latina y de Europa, además está cruzada por esta necesidad de renovar los compromisos con políticas de cohesión social, de sociedades un poco más igualitarias, un poco más equitativas y como resultado de esa lógica, bueno, en todas las regiones, en las dos regiones, más cohesionadas. El día de hoy, nuestro país anfitrión en términos digitales es Grecia, ¿no? Y agradecemos la participación y a la persona que la representa, al igual que agradecemos la participación de los panelistas que nos acompañan. En este día vamos a volver a revisar la situación social y laboral, particularmente de las personas que trabajan en el sector turístico. Es necesario recordar que durante la pandemia muchos empleos, millones de empleos se perdieron en términos directos e indirectos en América Latina, Europa y en el Caribe. Y que tanto en Europa cuanto en América Latina hay países y hay sectores de la economía que son especialmente vulnerables a desastres de tipo natural o a desastres como esta pandemia por el peso que el sector tiene en el Producto Interno Bruto. No se trata exclusivamente de las actividades específicas del sector, se trata del conjunto de las economías nacionales, varias en muchas veces que están atravesadas por estos retos. La pérdida de las fuentes de trabajo y de las fuentes de ingreso afectó además en forma especial a sectores más vulnerables, por ejemplo, a las mujeres que se encuentran, que son muy numerosas en este sector, pero también a trabajadores y trabajadoras jóvenes, mujeres, también el sector de los jóvenes y de las jóvenes, y las personas que han trabajado articuladas al sector, no necesariamente en términos formales, sino informales y eventualmente de precariedad, también fueron muy afectadas. Ambas regiones enfrentan hoy el reto de recuperar esos mercados y de reconstruir el sistema de relaciones sociales y económicas en una oportunidad para volverlo más incluyente y para volverlo más comprometido con las necesidades del conjunto de la sociedad, de manera que se construyan mecanismos de efectivamente resiliencia que permitan que las sociedades y que las personas se adapten eventualmente a las condiciones siempre cambiantes del entorno. Condiciones que por otra parte persisten no solamente por la pandemia, sino por otros otras dinámicas de carácter global, como por ejemplo el cambio climático, para mencionar de las más evidentes. Estas reflexiones y los conocimientos que se producen, se discuten, las discusiones, tienen que ir al mismo tiempo atendiendo a las exigencias de transición, no solo del sector, sino también del conjunto de las sociedades, y producir temas como protocolos sanitarios, comprender competencias digitales, promover prácticas amigables con el medio ambiente, lo que se llama turismo verde, por ejemplo, y en este diálogo queremos prestar precisamente más atención a los espacios donde más vulnerabilidad hay, y por eso a las cuestiones de género y al acceso a la protección social de los trabajadores y las trabajadoras que lo necesitan. El objetivo es, pues, fortalecer la resiliencia del mercado laboral ligado al sector turístico de cara a eventuales emergencias futuras. Quisiera reiterar que en este tiempo en donde los desafíos persisten, no solamente la pandemia, sino otros, es prioritario tejer redes entre organismos internacionales, entre los gobiernos y los actores de la sociedad civil, entre el sector privado y los trabajadores, las asociaciones laborales, y en el nivel de lo internacional entre la Unión Europea, América Latina y el Caribe, para avanzar hacia un modelo global de la industria y de los servicios turísticos más incluyentes, más sostenible, alineado con los objetivos de desarrollo sustentable y particularmente, por ejemplo, con el objetivo 8, que se concentra en el crecimiento económico y en el trabajo decente. Estamos seguras y seguros en la Fundación EULAC de que en este diálogo vamos a aprender de experiencias relevantes y vamos a oír conceptos innovadores, y que ellos van a contribuir a la generación de conocimientos, de iniciativas, de posibilidades políticas para la resiliencia y la protección social en el sector turístico de ambas regiones. Muchas gracias, Ana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bonilla, for your introductory remarks. We will now switch to the experts panel, and we have invited 4 distinguished experts, very competent experts, to the panel. We will start with Dr. Panagiota Dionisopoulou. We will then also have a presentation by Ms. Veronica Gomez. Third will be Ms. Kerstin Howald, and we are still waiting for the connection of Mr. Diego Rey, who will hopefully be able to connect a little bit later. After those first presentations, the audience that is following us can, of course, formulate some questions. I would ask them to formulate them in the chat room. You can formulate it in English, in Spanish, however you like. So we will have a little bit of interaction in the second part of this panel. Now it is my great pleasure to give a warm welcome to Dr. Panagiota Dionisopoulou, or Yola, how she also allowed me to call her. She's the General Director of Tourism Policy of the Ministry of Tourism in Greece. She holds a PhD in Tourism, Economics and Politics. She has many years of teaching experience in higher education institutions related to tourism and European politics. She has also held different management positions for a number of years at different institutions, and she has participated in the elaboration of tourism development studies within the programs of the Greek Tourism Organization, as well as a researcher at the University of Patras. Yola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Adrienne, for your kind words. We are very happy for our cooperation. Thank you. It is a great honor to participate in this important event with distinguished colleagues to discuss tourism recovery and resilience for the years to come. And I would like to thank the EULAC Foundation and UNDP for this opportunity. Representing approximately about 1/4 of the national GDP and the major export sector of the national economy, COVID-19 pandemic severely impacted the Greek tourism ecosystem. In this respect, the Greek government put at the center of the recovery the shift towards a sustainable travel and tourism experience by advancing evidence-based policy and harnessing innovation and digitalization in order to foster a more resilient, inclusive, and resource-efficient future. The national tourism ecosystem is highly interdependent with a heavy reliance on micro and small enterprises. Many regions of country, and mainly the insular areas, are over-dependent on the tourism sector, and some destinations are vulnerable to the effects of such crises due to their high resilience on tourism. Experience from the pandemic and management of its consequences highlight the need for a more strategic integration of the tourism sector within the wider economy. In addition, taking into consideration the necessity to spread the risks within the sector, the Ministry of Tourism of Greece worked for a wide diversification of the market base and product portfolio of destinations, including a mix of domestic and international tourists. Furthermore, sustainable tourism development is increasingly pursued within the context of broader economic and regional development planning, promoting greener tourism business models and value chains. In this respect, another specific challenge for policymakers is providing the right incentives throughout the value chain to promote sustainability and innovation. New certifications, accreditations, and quality standards are the new normal. Such shifts could foster positive change if, as research suggests, sustainability is more heavily widened in customers' decision-making. Then there is an opportunity for destinations and the industry to increasingly channel customer interest towards sustainability practices. In this respect, the current crisis is maybe an opportunity to make the tourism industry greener and more digital, thus resilient, maximizing the industry's contribution to growth and employment. Building greener and more resilient tourism involves supporting tourism in decarbonization, setting up science-based targets, reducing the impact of current activities and emissions, supporting the efficient use of energy resources, and promoting renewable energy use, investing in nature-based solutions, and integrating circularity in tourism operations. Furthermore, a sustainable recovery needs affordable and more sustainable multimodal transport and improved connectivity, smart management of tourism flows, diversification of the tourism offer, the development of green and digital skills for tourism professionals and more effort to raise awareness of the variety of landscapes and the cultural diversity across the world. In addition, there is a need to adopt preventive measures, facilitating assistance to visitors, developing contactless services or services empowering consumer choice and preferences at destination, focusing on green tourism. The industry should be convinced to allocate increasingly more resources to sustainability tasks, to develop and implement sustainable action plans, and adopt sustainability practices and principles in its corporate responsibility framework. Moreover, the industry should promote innovation to collect and report sustainability data as byproduct of business processes and enroll in European and internationally recognized and recommended third-party validated labels that contribute to measuring and reporting sustainability data. In addition, industry associations must be encouraged to provide training and require environmental reporting as membership requirement and report on their members' environmental performance. At government level, in light of COVID-19 lessons learned, and in order to strengthen the resilience and competitiveness of the national tourism product, the national tourism policy aims to support the twin green and digital transition of the tourism ecosystem, namely the green transition of the tourism industry and destinations, focusing on sustainable and responsible tourism, and the digital transition, utilizing the value of data and all available digital tools. At the heart of both strategies lies the development of skills, upskilling and reskilling of the people working on tourism. Green and digital transition, namely sustainability and innovation, rank on the top of the global and of course of the European tourism agenda for the European tourism ecosystem to recover and increasingly enhance its resilience. Resilience, inclusiveness, and accessibility is a central commitment regarding the national tourism product development, marketing, and management. All destinations and the industry are encouraged to favor a professional dealing with accessibility issues. This course of action, of course, entails the provision of inclusiveness and disability training for tourism professionals. That's why this event, organized by UNDP and EULAC, is of a great significance. This is an important exercise to share views and exchange practice experience on how to strengthen regional ties to promote a sustainable transition of the tourism sector to the post-COVID-19 era, offering more and better work positions in tourism, integrating the local communities, and implementing whole of government approaches. The development trajectory that is forget today will have significant implications for international tourism for the decades to come. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Viola. for those wonderful words. I think you addressed actually all the dimensions that we have been speaking about throughout the whole cycle of events on sustainable tourism. And you very well showed how they are interrelated, and how one strategy leads to the other and needs to also think of the other sector. And you also mentioned critically that training and skills and taking really a look at the workers, at the employees of the sector, and supporting them also to transition in and to acquiring those skills that are needed for this transition are very crucial. In this sense, it is very, very interesting also to take another of our panelists on board, Ms. Veronica Gomez. She's a director for the Americas at the International Social Tourism Organization, which has its base in Montreal in Canada. Veronica is originally from Montevideo in Uruguay, where she studied and then also worked for 10 years as a teacher and researcher at the University of the Republic. And then she migrated to Canada, and already in 2006, she assumed the position of director of Eastern Americas. Also, I would like to mention that between 2009 and 2014, she directed the Youth Travel Foundation, which is a scholarship program that encourages and promotes access to travel for young people between 15 and 35 in Canada. Also, she has been recognized as an expert member of the American Institute for Inclusive Tourism, based in Mexico. And over the past 15 years, she has coordinated different advisory and public projects for governments and organizations in various Latin American countries. So please, Veronica, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Ana. En primer lugar, agradecer muy cordialmente a la Fundación EULAC y a PNUD por esta oportunidad de dirigirnos a ustedes, a este auditorio, y también saludar a mis compañeras panelistas de esta mañana o de esta tarde europea, particularmente a Madame Howell de FAT, con quien la ISTO también ha estado trabajando y coordinándose en los últimos años, así que es un verdadero placer estar acompañándolos y ojalá iniciando una cooperación sostenible también con la Fundación EULAC y con PNUD. Por favor, Ana, te pediría que me digas si sí se ve bien la pantalla.
Perfecto.
Muchísimas gracias. Voy a iniciar entonces en estos minutos cortitos, pero con una presentación como para que nos dé algunas herramientas. Y me gustaría contarles por qué la Organización Internacional de Turismo Social se inserta en este webinario y qué es lo que tenemos para comentar en este sentido como organización. Entonces, muy brevemente comentarles que somos una asociación internacional sin fines de lucro que se crea en Bruselas en el año 1963 y que trabaja con sus socios a través de sus secciones regionales, África, Europa y Américas. Américas que está en negrita sencillamente porque es la que me corresponde dirigir, como Ana muy bien lo decía, desde Montreal, Canadá, y con un trabajo entonces que se hace desde estas secciones regionales para estar más cercanos a nuestros socios sobre una base continental. Con dos ambiciones principales, como son de la que partimos, que es la de permitir que la mayor cantidad posible de personas accedan al turismo y a las vacaciones, pero esto no de cualquier manera, sino bajo unos pilares que compartimos totalmente con nuestra colega que acaba de intervenir, unos pilares que tienen que ver con la accesibilidad, con la solidaridad, con la sostenibilidad, pero también con el respeto a las poblaciones locales y de sus patrimonios. con unas clientelas o unos públicos claramente identificados, en qué sentido unos segmentos que notamos claramente que tienen mayor dificultad en este acceso al turismo y a las vacaciones, y nos gusta decir que nos hemos convertido en esta casa común de los operadores del turismo social y de los actores del turismo responsable y solidario. Trabajamos entonces no para desarrollar el turismo, sino para generar un turismo de desarrollo que se encuentre al servicio de las personas, de las comunidades y de los territorios. Es decir, con un enfoque que es bien global e integral. En ese sentido, solamente comentarles que tenemos un documento de referencia, un documento guía, que es la Declaración de Montreal, y que se llama Por una visión humanista y social del turismo, que acaba de cumplir 25 años, pero que aún así sigue siendo un documento de total vigencia. Van a entender por qué, y lo que hicimos fue este documento hace un par de años, traducirlo en lo que nosotros denominamos el ADN del turismo social, es decir, lo que nos identifica, lo que posiciona o lo que describe qué es el turismo social, y lo tradujimos en esta flor que les estoy presentando, en donde este turismo social implica o se basa en 5 grandes componentes que son la inclusión, la calidad de vida, el medio ambiente, el comercio justo y la solidaridad. Pero además, hace 2 años, cuando hicimos esta traducción, entre comillas, de la Declaración de Montreal en este ADN del turismo social, también nos dimos a la tarea de empatarlo con los 17 objetivos de la Agenda 2030, de los 17 objetivos de desarrollo sostenible de la Agenda 2030 de Naciones Unidas, porque nos parecía importantísimo mostrar cómo desde lo que hace ISTO y desde lo que hacen sus socios, empatamos a través del turismo con estos 17 objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, me parece importantísimo que lo hayamos mencionado ya. Es la tercera intervención en la que los mencionamos, porque estamos francamente alineados, los que estamos convencidos de trabajar en este otro turismo, de romper algunos paradigmas, de ir por otras vías, por otros caminos, de que necesitamos estar alineados con estos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, y qué bueno que lo esté repitiendo y que no lo pronuncie por primera vez. En ese sentido, el tiempo no me da para evidentemente comentarles estos 5 ejes, pero sí mostrarles que cuando hablamos del eje del comercio justo, no solamente estamos hablando de favorecer una economía local, un consumo que sea sostenible y que sea responsable, sino que aquí también entran en consideración todos estos temas de empleo justo y condiciones de trabajo decentes, los derechos fundamentales de los trabajadores, hablamos de equidad de género y por supuesto de una gobernanza local participativa. Es por eso que estos temas del trabajo decente, de las condiciones de trabajo de los justamente trabajadores del sector turístico nos interpela como organización internacional. Entonces, para responder a la pregunta que nos hacen sobre cuáles son los principales retos a los que se enfrentan los trabajadores del sector turístico y cómo podemos abordarlos, después de esta presentación, Ana, me permitirás muy rápida de esto, hacernos algunas preguntas, ¿no? Empleo y turismo, ¿cómo estábamos antes? Y antes contábamos y repetíamos mucho esto, ¿no? 1 de cada 10 empleos, es decir, ¿cuál era el impacto económico que tenía el turismo? No me voy a detener. La siguiente pregunta que nos hacíamos, y quiero comentarles que esto no es una pregunta que nos hacemos desde la pandemia, sino que ya nos hacíamos como organización internacional desde antes de la pandemia, y nos preguntábamos hacia dónde nos estábamos dirigiendo. Y entonces, recomendarles, esperemos que nuestro compañero de la OIT pueda llegar también, y por eso no me voy a extender, Ana, pero sí lo quería mencionar, este documento que para nosotros resulta fundamental, las pautas de la Oficina Internacional del Trabajo sobre trabajo decente y turismo socialmente responsable, que también tuvimos oportunidad desde ISTO de presentarlo en varias ocasiones y que mostraba esta gran vulnerabilidad y estas condiciones de estos segmentos o de estos grupos migrantes, jóvenes y mujeres y cómo se estaban viendo afectados. Insisto, esto antes de que nos cayera esto que es el COVID, y entonces lo que descubrimos o lo que fuimos entendiendo, más que descubriendo, fue que hay o que se está viendo una aceleración de las tendencias. Tendencias desde varios enfoques, unas tendencias globales que tienen que ver con la incertidumbre que está vinculada a la pandemia, pero también con los cambios económicos, con cambios sociales, con los cambios climáticos que se están dando. Una aceleración en las tendencias también en el sector turístico, no lo voy a volver a mencionar porque ya lo dijeron, con un impacto muy fuerte para esas economías que dependían y que estaban muy vinculadas con el Producto Bruto Interno, pero también unas tendencias que tienen que ver con la manera como consumimos los viajes o cómo los turistas consumen esos viajes. ¿Cuáles son entonces los principales retos que vemos para el sector y los trabajadores? Primero, esa gran vulnerabilidad de la que ya muchos estábamos hablando antes y que sigue estando vigente hoy en día, y ustedes lo han mencionado antes que yo, estas condiciones de trabajo que se han visto diezmadas, pero también esta pérdida en los empleos. Entonces, ¿cómo mejoramos? Y ese va a ser uno de nuestros grandes retos, ¿cómo mejoramos esas condiciones y cómo aumentamos la protección social? También el gran reto es este gran éxodo de migración que se ha visto hacia otros sectores. La gente no podía estar esperando 1 año y medio o 18 meses. Concretamente hablo de América Latina y el Caribe, porque ustedes saben que Europa yo no diría recuperado, sería demasiado atrevido de mi parte, pero sí han tenido un verano en 2020, otro verano en 2021, pero América Latina y el Caribe sigue siendo duramente castigada, cuando no, además, han tenido en países de América Central también algunas catástrofes como huracanes e inundaciones y grandes lluvias. Entonces, ¿cómo hacemos para atraerlos nuevamente a todos estos trabajadores que se fueron? Pero además, ¿cómo aportamos para disminuir esa informalidad que, insisto, ya sabíamos que existía antes, estábamos trabajando, pero que ahora se ha incrementado? ¿Y cómo hacemos también cómo estamos trabajando en este gran reto que nos ha provocado esta gran escasez de mano de obra calificada y poco calificada, porque definitivamente se nos han ido, y los skills que justamente Ana Barrera nos comentaba, esta pérdida de habilidades que hemos estado viendo y sintiendo. ¿Cómo los estamos formando? ¿Qué les estamos ofreciendo a estos trabajadores? Estos para nosotros son los 3 grandes retos o los retos principales, y sin ninguna pretensión, evidentemente, pero desde el trabajo que hacemos nosotros, algunas ideas de por dónde abordar estos retos que nos parecen fundamentales. En primer lugar, tenemos que seguir insistiendo en el respeto de las legislaciones laborales en vigor, tanto nacionales como internacionales. Parece que todos estamos de acuerdo, pero al final del día la informalidad sigue existiendo, las condiciones de trabajo precarias siguen existiendo, entonces tenemos que mencionarlo y mencionarlo en el ítem número 1. Tenemos que continuar estimulando esa profesionalización del sector turístico, insistiendo en la capacitación, y en eso realmente estamos convencidos. También tenemos que estimular que ese cálculo de los márgenes del beneficio empresarial no puede crecer a costa de afectar esas condiciones laborales de nuestros trabajadores. Tenemos que seguir impulsando la paridad en el trato laboral en cuestiones de género, hay que seguir trabajando, no hemos podido avanzar en ese sentido. Evidentemente, trabajar en la creación de empleos que tengan condiciones dignas y que sean bien remunerados, y fortalecer una actuación empresarial que sea socialmente responsable y sostenible, y por supuesto combatir esta estacionalidad turística que ha demostrado que nos está llevando a estos contratos temporales y a contratos fijos que son discontinuos y que entonces generan este corte, es decir, no hay una continuidad. tenemos que seguir trabajando para que la inserción de los jóvenes no sea una inserción temprana y precaria, sino que estén formados para que se conviertan en estos trabajadores del futuro en el mercado o en el sector turístico. También tenemos que combatir esta discriminación que se da para acceder a un trabajo decente, y volvemos a insistir con cuestiones de género, pero también con cuestiones de raza y demás. Y por supuesto combatir sine qua non el trabajo infantil, la explotación sexual comercial y el trabajo forzado, como resultado de decir que necesitamos crecer turísticamente y entonces lo vamos a hacer sin importar las condiciones. En ese sentido, y ya terminando mi intervención, invitarlos a que sigamos coordinándonos, cooperando. Esta palabra que está muy de moda, pero que ojalá la pongamos de relevancia, esto de competir, de trabajar juntos aunadamente sin vernos como competición, sino trabajando, y sobre todo cambiar nuestro discurso y nuestra acción, volver a centrar, y el doctor Bonilla lo decía muy bien, volver a poner la parte social en relevancia, cómo la manifestamos, la hacemos también que sea importante, no solamente la contribución económica, sino la contribución social, pero sobre todo invitándolos a esta imagen que ven aquí, a salir de la caja. Y salir de la caja significa innovar. Innovar es una palabra que a veces parece que nos quedara muy grande, y significa sencillamente hacer las cosas diferentes. Si hemos encontrado que las cosas como las veníamos haciendo no estaban bien, pues ojalá hayamos aprendido en este alto impuesto por la pandemia a que tenemos que cambiar, y por eso decía un cambio de discurso y un cambio de acción, y recordarles ya terminando que sin trabajo decente no es posible hablar de un turismo sostenible. Entonces tenemos que considerar estas condiciones dignas, este trabajo decente, para poder avanzar juntos, América Latina, el Caribe y Europa, y también el resto del mundo, en este turismo sostenible, que es el que muchas organizaciones y muchos actores del turismo estamos reclamando y proclamando alto y fuerte. Muchísimas gracias.
Excellent. Thank you very much also, Veronica, for this very insightful presentation, which beared a lot of topics that are clearly relevant, especially for the Latin American and Caribbean sector, but also parts of Europe. Without further ado, I would like now to pass on the word to Kerstin Howald. Kerstin Howald studied social sciences in Germany and also graduated from Applied Business Languages and International Management. She has been already working with the European Federation of Trade Unions in the food, agriculture and tourism sectors, EFAT. Since 1995, she's the coordinator of European Trade Union Liaison Committee on Tourism. And EFAT, as some of you might know, pursues decent work, fair remuneration, high quality qualification and training, equal opportunities and workers' rights for all employees in the hospitality sector. And they are doing this through, for example, social dialogue, European Works Councils, and also through shaping and advocating for social, labor and tourism policies in Europe. So it is also a great pleasure for us to have you here on board. Kerstin, it's your space.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, and thank you for presenting EFAT. So yes, we are one of the European Trade Union Federations, and we represent, EFAT represents workers, as you said, in the food chain, so agriculture, food and tourism meaning the hospitality sector. So in our sectors jointly, we have more than 25 million workers. I think more than 10 million in the hospitality sector. And so we are also the regional organization of the IOF, which is our global union federation representing the workers in the similar sectors. And I think many of you in Latin America might know the IOF. I mean, if we look at the impact of COVID on the tourism sector, hospitality, I think the situation in Latin America and in Europe is a bit similar. So if we look at the drop of international tourism arrivals, I think in Latin America it was 65, in Europe 69% less of arrivals, although then also in both regions, the sub-regions, it's a bigger variety. In the Caribbean, I see only 38% less arrivals, but in South America, 85 according to UNWTO. And in Europe, it varies between the south of Europe, 60% less arrivals, and the northern Europe, 86. So there's a huge drop of arrivals, and this certainly also had impact on the employment in the sector. I think to my knowledge, we don't have really coherent statistics on the loss of jobs in tourism throughout the world. This is probably something we need to know. I mean, in Europe, we have the advantage that many countries have what we call job retention schemes, so that furlough, short-time work arrangements, so that workers who are temporarily out of work, that they get a certain percentage of their wages continue to be paid. So by this, many jobs could be safeguarded in Europe, and the European Union even gave some financial support to the member states with a so-called SURE instrument. So Europeans might know it. It's called Support to Mitigate Unemployment Risks in an Emergency. So this was really very much helpful. But because despite of all those safety nets we have in Europe, so we saw that many workers left the sector. So the sector, were laid off or left the sector. So I think for many of them, because the wages are already quite low, it was difficult to live on 60 or 70% of your wages, of the furlough allowances. So very difficult. But then also, I think many people saw that the future of the sector was really uncertain. When would it open up again for good? How long will it last? We see now the on and offs in all the countries. But then also many of them found jobs in other sectors, where they often then realized that they had better conditions. So this led really to the situation that when the restrictions were lifted and when travel and tourism took up again, that many hospitality businesses really couldn't find workers. So many hotels and restaurants, they could only open partially or not at all. But also then the impact of this on those who were still working was really drastic, because they have to work overtime, they have to do extra shifts. This has really an impact on the health of the people, and also is a danger that even those then might want to quit. So the question which you asked me to try to respond to is, so what could we do? So to solve the situation. So I think it's very important to make the hospitality sector attractive as a workplace. So to really to enable the sector to recruit and to retain sufficient staff. And this is not only about the image of the sector. So I think we are convinced that this is about the conditions. So for us, the most important elements to make sure that the sector is attractive is, first of all, really in general, the staff has to be valued. So they shouldn't only be seen as a cost factor, but we think that the staff is really the most important asset of any hospitality tourism business. It's a customer-orientated sector. The quality of the services provided by the sector is depending on the workers. And then, certainly very, very important, we have to significantly improve the working conditions in this sector. I think some of my predecessors already talked about this. We have to make sure that there are more stable, more permanent jobs, full-time, and not all those precarious jobs, all this outsourcing going on. The wages have really be of a level that people can live on. So also there needs to be, and I think Veronica said it very clearly, we have to make sure that people are properly secured, so have a proper social security, so social protection. But also the work organization in the sector is very important, working time. We know that the many people in the sector have to work when others are on holidays or have leisure time, but we are convinced, and it shows in many countries, it is possible to make working time also plannable, predictable for the people. So also to allow workers in the sector to reconcile their work with private life, with family life. Another very important issue is the whole question of qualification training. We have to make sure that people have career paths in the sector. So therefore professional qualification and skills have to be recognized, and there also needs to be regularly and upskilling. For us as trade unions, very important, we have to make sure that the workers have a say at the workplace. So the workers have the right to join trade unions, that they have workers' representation bodies in the companies, that they have really the right to defend their interests collectively. Very important for us. And we think that all this has to be done in a context of collective bargaining. So we really need strong sectoral collective agreements to be complied with by all, to have a level playing field, fair competition. But also we really have to strive for a strong sectoral social dialogue. We think, and we know that the social partners are the best to find tailor-made solutions to any problems. And also we see that it has shown that in many countries or in sectors and companies where there's a strong social dialogue, where there's a good cooperation of employers, companies with trade unions, workers' representatives, that they often get really better through any crisis and difficult times. So this in a nutshell, our proposals. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerstin. I think we are approaching to a somewhat complete picture of interesting approaches and needs of workers, especially. And I'm also being informed that we have a connection established with our last speaker, Mr. Diego Rey. He can hear us by phone. He is connected by phone. So I will just briefly present him, and then we try to establish the connection to him. Mr. Diego Rey assumed duties as employment and labor market policy specialist at the International Labour Organization and its Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean in 2016. He's an Italian, and he graduated at Bocconi University and the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. He has over 12 years of experience in the development sector with stints in the ILO, as well as the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and the United Nations Development Programme. Throughout his career, he contributed to the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies, programs, and activities tackling several labor market-related topics, including private sector development, activation, and school-to-work transition, unemployment insurance, labor rights, and responsibilities. So, Diego, it would be very, very great if you could a little bit also let us know from your side what you consider to be key components for building employment resilience in the tourism sector, and also specifically tackling the issue of social security.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, okay. A very good morning, everybody. I really had connection problems. It's sort of funny, in more than 2 years almost never happened. It happened today, but now I'm here, glad to be here. Thank you for your invitation, and I'm also sorry to not have been able to listen to the previous speakers. So thank you again. I wanted to share a little bit of our experience from the Caribbean, specifically from our investigation on what happened during the pandemic, and then suggest a couple of kind of crucial elements. And I want to speak about how business responded to the crisis and how policy responses were shaped, and then I'll go to the suggestions. Now, starting with the business response, I think one parallel that is sometimes made and could be made a bit more often is the one with post-natural disaster situation. Of course, the situation is quite different. We don't have infrastructural damages, etc. But we have a sectoral crisis, which de facto stopped any business activity, any employment. And what we found as ILO when we studied businesses' reactions in the Caribbean to post-hurricane situation was that there was very limited room for innovation, in the sense that most businesses, starting with the small ones, but also the large ones, did not change basically at all their business model. In other words, the approach was to wait for the recovery to kick in, tourists to return, and then restart the business as usual. Now, what happened during the COVID crisis? There appears to be some evidence of at least partial accelerated shift in the business model, notably via the offer of new services. Examples could include the so-called day tourism for nationals, general upgrade of web presence, or bundle delivery of services, first and perhaps foremost by the introduction of food delivery. What we also found is that often the crisis led to enhanced business-to-business collaboration. So within the tourism subsectors, there was more collaboration, probably as a way to survive. Now, the big question is, will this path of innovation be maintained? Will the Caribbean tourism as an industry be able to continue to innovate? Or will we revert to the mean? Or will we just stick to where we are now? This is an open-ended question. Now, for what concerns policy response, during the COVID crisis, several support measures for both businesses and workers targeted the tourism industry, specifically designed for the tourism industries and for the businesses and for the workers. At times, different shapes, cash transfers, tax incentives, delayed payments of duties and contributions, and salary support. Salary support in some cases was conditional on workers' retention, for instance, in Bahamas, but it's not the only country. In few cases, there were tourist-specific targeted retraining programs. Jamaica, Aruba are a couple of examples. In other cases, there were publicly funded infrastructure projects having direct impact on tourism and on tourism-related facilities. Those infrastructure projects generated additional jobs in the process. An example is the St. Vincent and the Grenadines refurbishment of hiking trails. Perhaps the most innovative response was the offer of extended touristic visa for remote work that made the headlines across the world. However, this was reportedly at least only partially successful. Now, depending on who you ask, these measures were deemed sufficient or not. Data showed that in the Caribbean, tourism industries and their workers are incontrovertibly the most affected in terms of both output and employment. Digging a bit further, there is one element to emphasize, especially remembering the SDG motto, leave no one behind. The smaller the business and the more afar from tourist epicenters, the harder it has been. With borders reopening, recovery kicked in. This is a fact, but that recovery was uneven. Not everybody benefited from it or benefited from it sufficiently fast. Now, to conclude this overview of policy response, from a more macro standpoint, tourism has generally been put at the center of the recovery process, at least in words. Several Caribbean countries emphasize the need to rely on traditional industries, while others, for example Guyana, explicitly made tourism one of the cornerstones of diversification efforts. In light of the above, I'd like to conclude with a couple of considerations about what could be next. There have been a lot of labels attached to the recovery process. Human-centered, to start with. This comes from the 2021 International Labour Conference Declaration. Tourist-centered, digitally oriented, sustainable, green, blue, orange. Translating this into practice has been the challenge. Two suggestions could come to mind. First, there seems to still be room to combine different objectives. Let me explain. If a given policy, a program, or an intervention is put in place, more can still be done to ensure that it combines, for instance, the need to support the tourism sector with the one to make it greener and digitally oriented, or to make its workers resilient to future crises by suitable skills and income protection, or still, to make its businesses prepared to handle the risk in the future. COVID-related, hurricane-related, handle the risk in the future. It's something that can be pushed forward. Of course, this is easier said than done, but careful policy design driven by consultations, including by a social dialogue, is the necessary condition to ensure this could happen. Second, it may be time to seriously reflect on sectoral policies, including the tourist ones, by a more exhaustive framework of analysis. The intent to diversify into tourism or diversify the tourism offer, think about ecotourism, sea and nature tourism, or whichever other combination, will not magically make it happen. Even if some conditions are fulfilled, resources are invested, commercialization is pushed, a systemic approach is more than ever needed. Natural resources alone will not suffice if, for instance, concerns about safety are present, or infrastructures are not satisfactory, or services not at par with international competitors. Careful market analysis and feasibility studies accounting for market forces and consumer preferences need to continue to be at the root of any significant public investment. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic we are here convened to discuss is broad and full of implications. For the time being, I will stop here and thank you for your attention. Apologies again for my connection problems. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Diego, that despite of those difficulties, you tried to connect and we could hear you very well. Thank you very much. I will now, in the minutes that are left, try to take on board some of the questions that were formulated either in the chat or through other channels. There is one question which I would like to direct to Veronica Gomez. One attendee wrote in Spanish, I will read it in Spanish. ¿Qué estrategias se pueden implementar para acompañar el proceso de profesionalización de turismo como políticas públicas que apoyen a la sostenibilidad, calidad y seguridad social? Y especialmente bajo la mirada a un sector donde hay muchas poblaciones vulnerables, incluyendo también migrantes.
Es una excelente pregunta para la cual me gustaría tener rápidamente en estos minutos una gran respuesta. Creo que tendríamos que hablar de co-construcción, de cuando hablamos de la formación desde una política pública, desde esa política pública y desde esa formación todos los actores estén involucrados. Me parece que pasa por ahí. Sobre cómo desde esta política pública, por un lado, se toma conciencia sobre la importancia de la formación, por otro lado, cómo se acompaña colectivamente y se co-construye identificando cuáles son las competencias que se tienen que adquirir y cómo se hace evolucionar en esa práctica profesional a ese trabajador. Pero insisto, creo que hay una co-construcción y una corresponsabilidad para profesionalizar este sector turístico y que va de la mano, si va de la mano, que me parece que sí, de una política pública en donde todos los actores estén igualmente involucrados y no sea un rol específicamente que le pidamos o que le solicitemos al empleador o a la autoridad pública o al mismo sector o al trabajador. Creo que es una competencia de todos donde tiene que haber un gran involucramiento.
Thank you very much, Veronica. I also have another question for Kerstin Howald. Kerstin, you delineated very well different aspects that are crucial. Just to mention a few, more stable permanent jobs, to the importance to have wages from which the people really can live, with the proper social security, of course. Also, you mentioned training and interesting career paths. And also you mentioned that workers should have a voice, obviously, and have a right to collective bargaining. Perhaps, would it be possible for you to share with us one of two examples, concrete examples from European countries, which you would like to share with the audience, like good examples on one of those issues?
Thank you very much. I mean, first of all, I would like to underline what some of the other panelists said. I think, Veronica, you said very, very well that there won't be any sustainable tourism without decent work. And also, I fully agree with what Almuniera Fernandez said at the beginning, that we really need universal, inclusive, sustainable social protection. I mean, with the good practices, it's a bit difficult for the moment, because unfortunately in Europe we have often a different view on the solutions which are needed between the trade unions, the workers, and the employers and the companies. So it's a bit difficult in this situation to come up with some good examples, because we see really the situation deteriorating in most of the countries, and unfortunately also in many countries for the moment the employers are not really ready to talk to the unions to come up with some common solutions. So I'm a bit trapped on this question in the moment. Yeah, honestly, and on the question on training, I mean, we are really also working on this at European level for the moment with regard to all questions of vocation, education and training, skills and so on. What is very important for us in this respect also is that, I mean, in most countries, there is already many initiatives going on with regard to qualification and training. And in most countries, the social partners are also involved in the development of curricula of vocation, education and training, in the assessment what future skills needs are. So what we also here often underline is that it's important to build on the existing structures and the existing work that is already done in members. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, so we really have to make sure that we don't try to start new issues like in Europe now for the moment with the Pact for Skills and stuff like this. So we really think we should build on this, and also here we think that it works in companies, probably not necessarily in our sector, that really there is good cooperation between the workers' representatives and the companies, the managements, to identify training needs, to jointly see how this could be done, what training programs could be, to implement them, to assess them, to evaluate them. So this is for us the best way to go, and to always involve those who are really working at the shop floor, because they know the best what to do and what needs are there. We have some good examples in Europe, because we have something what we call the European Works Councils. You might have heard of those, at least those in Europe, that companies, transnational companies, have to bring together workers' representatives from all the countries where they operate. So bringing them together, discussing issues of the company. So this is for us a very important tool also to make sure that there is a dialogue at company level, at a cross-border level. And there we have sometimes some good results with some good ideas how to address issues in the sector. I hope that answers your question, at least partly.
Thank you very much. I also have two questions for Dr. Panagiota Yola. The one would be, what are some of the new and emerging initiatives in digital innovations in tourism that could have a positive effect in the employment trends? And another question, which we always pose in those sessions, is which kind of ideas do you have in order to strengthen the collaboration between Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean in order to jointly construct a more resilient tourism sector?
Thank you, Anna, because it's an excellent opportunity for me to say that, first of all, the cooperation between the countries of European Union and Caribbean it's a great opportunity to share our common views, to exchange the best practices, or to share ideas for a common ground in order to show the tourism ecosystem the next period after the COVID-19 era. So it's very important for us to coordinate, to communicate, to exchange our common problems, issues, and challenges that you could face in order to see the tourism sector, the tourism ecosystem, with an holistic approach for the next day. So for us, the Greek Ministry of Tourism is one of its priority, the collaborations, and to exchange and to discuss the synergies in very in every politic, because the tourism sector is a sector that affects and is affected by every state policy, the policy of environment, the policy of transport, the foreign affairs policy. So it's very crucial for us to extend this cooperation and to build our links in order to promote the tourism ecosystem, the tourism sector that is a very sensitive sector. And so a lot of times we discuss for the economic impacts of this sector, but the political aspect of it, there is a little bit more there is a gap among the stakeholders. And so you give me the opportunity to refer that the participant, the contribution of stakeholders of the private sector is very essential in order to formulate the tourism policy in the destinations and to see the local needs and the participation of the local people is a very, very crucial component in order to have a decision-making process very effective. So about the approach for the digital transformation, we know, yes, that is one of the high priority and in the European level. And of course, the COVID-19 period show us that it's a way to see each other, to communicate, to discuss, and to try to find the opportunity to see each other, no virtually. But in any case, in the Ministry of Tourism, we have a priority to collect and to measure the data, creating the MMOs in the destinations, and to promote this destination as a destination of excellence, as well as these destinations collect and have data for some activities of course, human life. So the digital transformation in SMEs and the initiatives that we could give to them is one of the priorities of the policy in the Ministry of Tourism. In addition, our 10-year strategy, National Strategy Planning for Tourism Development, is launched in the midst of a particularly difficult period in terms of challenges and competition. So main axes include product development and promotion, accessibility and connectivity, and of course, green infrastructure, tourism sustainable development, experience management, tourism education, of course, because in the Ministry of Tourism, we have schools and vocational training institutions. So the issue of upskilling or reskilling is one of hardcore issue that we could face, and the whole of government approach, regulatory framework and crisis management, of course, that we could see in a more constant way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yola. I have two last questions, and one perhaps Veronica could help us to attend. And the last one, if Diego still can stay connected, I would ask him to address. Veronica, I would first read the one in Spanish to you. ¿Qué acciones específicas se adelantan para la prevención de la trata de personas, en especial de niños y niñas asociadas al turismo? And the last one, Diego, would be an outlook for the future. The question goes, what else do you think we can expect to see in terms of employment and innovation in employment in the tourism sector in the near future? Veronica, would you be able to respond first?
Sí, Ana, con todo gusto. En cuanto a las acciones específicas, lamentablemente tenemos que seguir diciendo e insistiendo en que hay que hacer una sensibilización, en que aun cuando hay medidas no son respetadas, y entonces en ese sentido, cuando hablamos de un turismo responsable y de un turismo sostenible, los actores tienen que involucrarse, y yo insisto mucho con esto de que es un compromiso de todos. No podemos, por ejemplo, pretender, y tomo el ejemplo de Grecia, que en Grecia desde el Ministerio de Turismo griego se diga no a la explotación sexual si tenemos un sector turístico que no hace caso. Entonces, necesitamos unas líneas muy duras y muy drásticas, pero necesitamos desde el conserje del hotel que ve entrar a ese hotel y que está siendo consciente de que hay un turismo sexual, de que hay una explotación o una trata de blancas, que esté concientizado en denunciar ese tema, y entonces cómo nos corresponde a todos ser vigilantes y estar con los ojos atentos, pero sobre todo responsabilizarnos, porque también tendemos a medir el éxito de un destino turístico por la cantidad de turistas que llegan en vez de por la calidad de los que llegan. Si nosotros nos ponemos como un destino que no acepta la explotación infantil, la explotación sexual, la trata de blancas, entonces estaremos llamando a que estos turistas que están alineados con estos valores vengan a visitarnos. Y esto no es un compromiso de las autoridades públicas únicamente o del sector privado en poner en las acciones en marcha, sino que es un compromiso que nos compromete a todos a ser vigilantes, actores, y a ser vigilantes tanto desde la oferta como desde la demanda y desde lo que nos posicionamos como destino.
Thank you very much. I can only subscribe your answer, dear Veronica.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also, Diego. If you still are with us, would you be able to give a little response to this last question, which was communicated through one channel? It seems that Diego is not longer able to address. So perhaps I would just invite Kerstin and Yola to have a last word on what you think. Diego, are you with us?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, sorry, I had to click on a special function. Thanks. Thanks for the question. Innovation on business and employment. I think, first of all, there is a gap to be filled. If we have countries with 60% of informal employment, including possibly in tourism, that's where we have to start from. So regularize the employment relationship, ensure fundamental labor rights, ensure collective bargaining. This is not innovation somehow, but this is a gap that has been existing for several years, which still needs to be addressed. In terms of innovation, let me just in businesses, let me just reiterate the point of making this systemic. Business, we saw from this pandemic that they have the creative capacity to innovate, but that by itself is not enough. If tourists cannot come, or if tourists do not come because of various exogenous factors not under the control of the business, and this is something that was highlighted in several discussion with small businesses and local stakeholders. I'm not going to go into details, but there are several elements which need to be addressed before tourists can actually make the decision to reach out to businesses that are willing to innovate. So tackle those barriers, tackle them in a systemic way, and then let businesses actually manifest their creative capacity. That's the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time, but actually I found the exchange and the dialogue with all of you really very, very fruitful. And it is really a great pleasure and honor to having you on board. And this will not be the final stage of this journey. Actually, we will be producing a policy brief based on all those exchanges and interesting examples that you as panelists and other experts of the other sessions have been proposing. So I just would like to invite all of you to remain attentive. We will be sending out this policy brief as soon as we will finalize it, and hope that then out of this new alliances, new initiatives, new cooperation mechanisms can be born. I will now pass on the floor to Almudena Fernandez, who will close the session.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you to all our fantastic panelists. I think this has been an extremely rich discussion. And I walk away feeling there are many challenges, as have been discussed, but there are many reasons to be optimistic. I think we're seeing, overarchingly, I think we agree that COVID can be an opportunity to kind of shift gears in this sector to make it more resilient, more sustainable, and to employ in a way that builds resilience within populations. I think just to close, I think across the board, we're seeing that there's a shift in the way people consume and the way people invest. I think there's more awareness and people really want to invest and travel and visit and go to places where things align with their values of sustainability, of fairness, of justice. And this is something that this shift has been happening, but I think COVID has really create some momentum for this. And I think that's where a lot of the things that have been discussed in this conversation come into play. For example, what are the opportunities for digitalizing the sector? How can we use digitalization to kind of, generate more transparency in terms of information to where people want to visit and what are the working conditions in that place. And I think, for example, digitalization provides opportunities not only for improvement of data, as was mentioned, to improve the tourist experience, but also to improve how we think about the whole sector's value chain, right? From the very small SMEs that provide some of the inputs necessary for the whole sector to discuss. So how can we use technology to really kind of make improvements in the working conditions across the whole value chain that is relevant to the tourism industry? I think working conditions have been very prominent in the conversation. How do we improve these? Informality continues to be an important challenge, at least in Latin America and the Caribbean. So how do we think not only about transitioning from a vulnerable place of employment to a more secure place of employment, but also how do we think about also supporting vulnerable SMEs that contribute to the sector to be more resilient and to be able to hold on to the employment they generate. Another important issue that has been discussed is the issue of migration and how can we think about migration in the context of the tourism sector. So I just wanted to provide a quick wrap up. Like I said, I think the challenges are many, but the opportunities are as well. So this has been an extremely interesting conversation for us, and I'm really looking forward to continue to work with the EULAC Foundation and building these briefs and kind of generating some discussion around these areas. Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the audience who was following us from different parts of the world, and also for the distinguished experts, Dr. Panagiota Dionisopoulos, Ms. Veronica Gomez, Ms. Kerstin Howald, and also Diego Rai. Thank you very much for being with us, and stay in touch.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.